Oh boy, it's finally time. Today I get to talk about Harvest Moon 64. As mentioned in a previous video, this was the very first Harvest Moon and farming sim game I ever played, and it really sparked my love of the series and the genre as a whole. Released in February 1999, it's the third installment in the Harvest Moon franchise, though it can be considered the second in the mainline series, since Harvest Moon on Game Boy was largely a scaled-down version of the SNES game. Unlike the previous two titles, which came out fairly late in their respective console lifetimes, Harvest Moon 64 landed right in the middle of the N64's lifespan. And just to give you an idea of where N64 games were at the time, this was just months after games like Ocarina of Time, Mario Party, and Super Smash Bros. Were released, and just months before the launch of titles like Castlevania, Pokemon Stadium, and Donkey Kong 64. And to also give you an idea of where other sim-style games were at the time, both Roller Coaster Tycoon and the dating sim Tokimeki Memorial 2 would release that same year. And the first entry in the long-running series The Sims would release exactly a year and 1 day later. Now, the entry into the 3D era of games was a big hurdle for any studio that made the jump. The complexities of not only 3D models and environments, but also acclimating to a 3D camera made going from platforms like the SNES to the N64 a big undertaking. Some companies did so gracefully, even if they show their age these days, while others didn't quite stick the landing. The Harvest Moon devs made this jump by opting to create a game in a style that evoked a 3D feel without actually being in 3D. From the looks of it, they likely did something similar to the Donkey Kong Country games, where the characters and assets are technically modeled in 3D, but are exported as 2D sprites. You can really notice it these days on modern ports of the game, where you can clearly see the pixel-by-pixel outline of every asset. Harvest Moon 64 is definitely a game that visually benefited from its original appearance on CRT screens, where the pixel bleeds softened everything and kinda hid those edges. Couple all that with a camera that's set at a fixed isometric view, and the game easily passed as looking 3D, when in reality it largely wasn't. Other games like the aforementioned Donkey Kong Country, as well as Mario Kart 64, use the same trick, and I think it was a pretty smart choice for the small dev team working on Harvest Moon. It allowed the team to create models with a softer look than that of the game's contemporaries, while also keeping things within a scope that a smaller team could handle. And, coupled with artist Igusa Matsumoto's now iconic art style and character design, the game has a very charming and toy-like visual style to it. Now the game begins with a funeral. Yeah, the pre-menu cutscene is of the entire town mourning the passing of one of their own. It's a surprisingly somber start to an otherwise charming and generally lighthearted game, but it immediately conveys to the player a level of depth and character that wasn't seen in the previous entries. Through this cutscene, you come to find that it was your grandfather who recently passed. In his passing, he's left you the farm, which has fallen into disrepair, and it's up to you to revive it. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Anyway, push the start and let's go. You once again control Pete, and no, not that Pete, a different Pete. Though, as usual, you're free to name him whatever you want, and now you can actually use more than 4 letters. Not that it changed much for me. You're also given the chance to name your dog, as well as your new farm. If you played Harvest Moon on SNES, then you'll notice that things are looking pretty familiar. Your farm layout is nearly identical to that of the SNES, save for a few small tweaks. And that's because, well, it is the same farm. Yes, Harvest Moon 64 is actually a direct sequel to the original game, and one of the few, if not only direct sequels in the franchise. It's never directly stated in the game, but a number of characters allude to things from the SNES titles. The town name is the same, and one villager from the first game even makes an appearance, but more on all that in a bit. As for your farm, you have your house, your shipping bin, your barn and stable, and your coop. Notably missing from the first game is the tool shed, as your tools now all have a dedicated toolbox inside your house, which is much handier. There are also fewer watering holes, with the game cutting them down to just one pond in the northeast part of your farm. Upon walking outside, the mayor will greet you and offer to show you around town. It's handy if you're new to the game and want to be shown where everything is and greet everyone, but it does take up some of your day. The town, just like your farm, hosts a very similar layout to that of the first game, again with some small tweaks. The town map is now split into 2 screens, a north and south screen. And just so we're all on the same page, with the game being at this isometric angle, I am considering the upper right direction to be north, as it mirrors what was north on the SNES game. In the north half of the village, you have the flower shop, the church, the bar, the bakery, the tool shop, and the artisan workshop. And in the south half, you have the library, the mayor's home, the midwife's home, and the potion dealer's shop, along with a small graveyard. There's also an event square, which has been moved from its central position in the first game to an elevated position up some stairs to the west of the northern district. Again, this town layout is very similar to that of the SNES title, while also changing a few things to make the village not only larger, but feel like things have changed and evolved in the time span between the two games. Lastly, when it comes to returning locales from the first game, we have Moon Mountain to the north, and after its complete absence in Harvest Moon on Game Boy, it's really nice to see its return. Like the town, the mountain is made larger and split into multiple screens, 5 to be exact. You have the mountain entrance, which features the same pond and fisherman's tent from the SNES game. To the west, you have the clearing with the carpenter's cabin. Another screen west is the goddess pond. North of the mountain entrance is a clearing with some stumps that will eventually turn into the hot spring. And finally, north of the carpenters is a winding trail that eventually leads to the summit of the mountain, though this screen will be locked off for the first 3 seasons of the game. The mountain now feels much more expansive. Not only is there more to do and explore, but more characters will spend time here, which better incentivizes the player to regularly go there. But, along with expanding the existing areas of the first game, Harvest Moon 64 also added multiple new locales. Taking the southern path of the crossroads will bring you to Green Ranch, where you can buy livestock and animal supplies. And taking the northwestern path will have you arrive at a vineyard. To the east of Green Ranch is now a small beach with a pier, and the cave just north of the Carpenter's Lodge holds the home of the Harvest Sprites and the mine. These new areas not only give the player more variety in their day-to-day activities, but they make the little town of Harvest Moon 64 feel that much more fleshed out. The beach especially helps make the world feel bigger, as it hints to a world beyond the confines of the game. Now, starting out, you're given 300 gold and a base set of tools. That's your hoe, sickle, axe, hammer, and watering can. These will be in your inventory by default, and oh hey, an inventory! Yes, finally, at long last, your character has a backpack, which grants you a proper inventory. It's limited, sure, but it's a hell of a step up from the first game. Pressing start will open your inventory, where you'll be greeted with a slot for 8 tools, a slot for 8 items or belongings, and a third slot which will be for key items. It also features a note with how much money you have, and a clock that tells you the time, the season, the day of the month, and the day of the week, making it really handy to see where you are in game on the fly. The green and blue boxes at the top of this menu are your equipped items. Green is for tools, and blue is for your belongings, and as you might have guessed, those colors coincide with the A and B buttons on the N64 controller. Pressing the B button will use whatever tool you have equipped, and pressing the A button will hand off whatever item you're holding. That is, gifting it to villagers, putting it in the shipping bin, or dropping it. Either way, it's a relief to finally have a proper inventory, and the design of its UI, from the checkered background to the wood and clay-like textures of the assets, really heightens that charming, down-on-the-farm vibe. Now, as for those tools. Much like the first game, the basic set can be leveled up to be both more efficient and less draining of your stamina. Though, this time around, they're much more straightforward in how they level up, no longer relying on scripted events or, God forbid, the timer function of the Game Boy title. But they do require a little work. Now, leveling up your tools requires you to use them. Just use them. Each use of a tool ticks up a hidden meter, and once that meter fills, your tool levels up, first to silver, then to gold. Now, while that might sound easy, and in some ways is, the tools require you to use them a lot. The hammer alone, which is the easiest to upgrade, takes 100 uses per level. That's 100 to reach silver and another 100 to reach gold. The hoe takes 300 uses per level, the sickle 350, the axe 450, and lastly the watering can takes a whopping 600 uses per level, or a total of 1200 to fully upgrade. And when you have such limited stamina and fatigue, that's rough going. The other tools will include the brush, milker, clippers, bottle, bell, and fishing pole. But fortunately, those don't need to level up, so you'll only have to focus on improving those original 5 tools. And with all the field clearing and, hopefully, crop planting and watering you'll do in your first couple days, you'll likely be flying through your stamina and fatigue meters. And let's talk about those. Pete has 3 hidden stats in the game: stamina, fatigue, and happiness. Stamina is, of course, a returning mechanic, and it's rather straightforward. You start off with 100 points of stamina, and each use of a tool will decrease your stamina by a set amount of points, which varies by tool. If your stamina reaches 0, indicated by Pete falling over when you try to use a tool, you'll no longer be able to use any tools until you've recovered stamina. That's done through either eating something or sleeping. You can also increase your max stamina with the power berries, which make a return from the first game. Like that game, each one is obtained in a different manner, some easy and some much more complex, for a total of 10 berries. Fatigue, on the other hand, is new and works a little inverse to stamina. See, with fatigue, you start off with 0 points, and each use of a tool will increase your fatigue by a set amount of points, again, varying by the tool. If your fatigue reaches 100 points and you sleep without lowering it, you'll get sick, and you'll lose an entire day as Pete will have to stay in bed and recover. Fatigue and stamina can both be restored by eating certain items or by sleeping. However, where sleeping fully restores stamina, fatigue is restored on a per-hour basis, meaning you have to go to bed earlier if you want to restore more by resting. Of course, in the long run, it doesn't really matter how fatigued you are, so long as you don't have a full 100 points of fatigue when you go to bed. Even being at 99 points will prevent you from getting sick the next day, so the best thing to do to combat sickness is simply to eat a medical herb every day before going to bed. And you definitely don't want to waste days to sickness, since, if I calculated correctly, the days are even shorter in Harvest Moon 64 than they are in the SNES game. Not by much, but hours in Harvest Moon SNES were roughly 15 seconds long, but in Harvest Moon 64, they're about 12. Of course, the rule of time stopping when you're indoors still applies, so you have a little bit of grace there, but you no longer have the luxury of an endless night like in the SNES game. Seasons also still last 30 days, which will be fairly standard for much of the series. This all might make your first spring, or even your first year in the game, feel rather frantic, but the longer you play and get into a routine, and as you check things off of your long-term to-do list, the longer the days and seasons will start to feel. So, you have your farm, your tools, and a vague understanding of how stamina works. It's time to get planting. The flower shop is right where it was in the first game, this time around being run by Lilia and her daughter Potpourri, and it's where you'll be buying all of your seeds for crops, grass, and a new addition, flowers. Harvest Moon 64 boasts a wider array of crops than its SNES forefather, as well as more than the Game Boy game. Sort of. Okay, technically it offers one less crop than the Game Boy game, but where the Game Boy Harvest Moon gate-kept crops behind how you named your farmer, Harvest Moon 64 does no such thing, granting all crop types to the player with no strings attached. For spring, you have your classic turnips and potatoes, but Harvest Moon 64 adds a third offering in the form of cabbage. All 3 crops cost the same at 200 gold per bag, and all 3 are single harvest crops, so the difference between them is down to the selling price and growth speed. Turnips are the fastest to grow, taking only 4 days, but they only sell for 60 gold each. Next is the potato, which takes 6 days to grow and sells for 80 gold, and finally is the cabbage, which takes a whole 8 days to grow, but sells for 90 gold. Moving on to summer, we have good old tomato and corn again. Both cost 300 gold per bag, and both are multi-harvest crops. Tomatoes mature and are ready to harvest after 9 days, and will regrow in another 3. They can be sold for 90 gold each. Corn takes longer to grow, needing 13 days to mature and another 4 to regrow, but they can be sold for a decent 120 gold each. Come autumn, the only crop on offer will be the eggplant. While it's the least amount of variety per season so far, it's still more than the SNES game offered, and goes a long way to making fall more interesting. Just like summer crops, eggplants cost 300 gold per bag and are multi-harvest crops. They're the fastest growing of the 3, needing only 7 days to mature and another 3 to regrow, though as you probably guessed, this means they sell for less, going for only 60 gold each. Winter is a little more complicated. By default, no crops will be available and nothing can be grown outdoors in this season. However, if the player saves up enough money and wood to purchase the greenhouse, it'll unlock the final crop, strawberries, as well as give players access to the other crops all year round. Strawberries cost the most out of all the crops, going for a whopping 500 gold per bag. They're a single harvest crop and take 6 days to grow, and sell for 150 gold each. Now, the odd thing about strawberries is that, unlike the other crops, which become available year-round once you have the greenhouse, strawberries can only be purchased in winter, despite the fact that you need the greenhouse to unlock them in the first place. The new seed type on offer at the flower shop are, well, flowers. There are only 2 types of flowers you can buy seeds for, but only one is sold regularly at the flower shop, and that's the moondrop flowers. These seeds go for 300 gold per bag and will grow in 6 days. They can't be sold and, outside of a power bear event, serve little purpose aside from being gifts for your many, many new neighbors. Most everyone in the game likes flowers to some extent, so they make for a convenient present. But of course, they're extra effective on a number of the town's single ladies. Planting crops functions nearly identically to the first game. 1 bag of seeds will plant a 9x9 square, but you'll want to be mindful of your ability to water all of them, since you can't reach that middle spot once the plants have sprouted. The same tips and tricks from the SNES title will apply here, though I may add one addition. That is, the use of an N64 controller, or something with a similar notched thumbstick. That's due to Harvest Moon 64's isometric angle. When using a more standard controller, I found myself often struggling to turn it just the right angle, often overshooting and accidentally watering an empty space or throwing chicken feed in the wrong direction. And the notches on the N64 controller greatly helped that. I was able to dig out my old controller and use a USB converter, but the official modern N64 controller from Nintendo, or any third-party one with a similar notch design, should help. Finally, there's grass, which functions the same as in the SNES game. It's 500 gold per bag, which can be bought in spring and summer. Grass will grow and be harvestable all throughout spring, summer, and fall, and will go dormant in the winter. The fodder you get from harvesting grass can't be sold, but instead serves as food for your barn livestock. And speaking of livestock, like crops, we see a new addition here as well. Along with the returning cows and chickens, Harvest Moon 64 now offers sheep. Now, chickens remain largely unchanged from the first game. They cost 1,500 gold, and an adult chicken that's happy and well fed will lay 1 egg every day. Once you've bought a chicken, you don't actually need to bother buying any more. Just place its egg in the incubator, and in a few days it'll hatch. In another week, it'll become an adult and begin laying eggs itself, meaning you can fill your coop in under 2 seasons. One change chickens did see is that they no longer eat fodder. Now they eat special chicken food, which you have to buy from Green Ranch. It's 10 gold per bag, and each bag is good for feeding 1 chicken for 1 day. It's best to get in the habit of buying a large amount of feed semi-often, as it's very easy to run out if you're not paying attention. Of course, if you're out of chicken food, you can leave them outside to eat, as they'll graze and feed themselves. However, that comes with its own potential downsides. For starters, you can't leave them out in the rain, as it'll upset them and they won't produce eggs. If they're left out in a typhoon, there's a chance they'll blow away completely. You also can't leave them out in winter at all. Presumably it's too cold for them to find seeds and worms to eat. You also have to make sure they're guarded by a wooden fence when outside, otherwise they can be attacked by wild dogs at night. And do remember that time in the game works the same as in the SNES title, where time moves outside, but freezes when inside a building. So caring for your chickens when they're outside is all done on the clock, while doing so inside the coop wastes no time at all. That said, unlike the SNES game, this time it really is your choice whether you'd like the predictability of keeping them in the coop, or the cost-effective method of keeping them outside. Then there's the livestock in the barn. Cows, like chickens, function similarly to the first game. You purchase them for 6,000 gold as a calf, which will take about 21 days to mature into a fully grown cow that can start producing milk. caring for your cows entails feeding, brushing, milking, and talking to them once a day to not only keep them happy, but raise their affection. Now, this will require the purchase of the brush and milker from Rick's shop, which go for 600 gold and 1800 gold respectively. A cow's affection level is directly tied to the quality of milk it produces. Starting off, a low affection cow will produce small milk, which sell for 100 gold. Medium milk sells for 150 gold, and large milk sells for 300 gold. Lastly, there's golden milk, which sells for 500 gold, but a cow has to win the cow festival to begin producing that. Once you have at least one adult cow, you can also impregnate that cow with a miracle potion, purchased from Green Ranch. This item costs only 3,000 gold, cutting the cost of acquiring a new cow in half, with the trade-off being a doubling in the time until that new cow becomes an adult. The pregnant cow can still be milked, however the quality of its milk will go down one level during pregnancy. So, for example, a cow that produces large milk will only produce medium milks while pregnant. And hey, can we talk about the design of these cows for a second? These are, in my opinion, the quintessential Harvest Moon cows. Nicknamed bubble cows by the fandom due to their round and bubble-like shape, this cow design is what would be used in a wide range of Harvest Moon games. Their design is a pure 10 out of 10. Soft, round, shaped like a friend. I just want to pop them in my mouth and chew on them. Absolute top-tier cows. But, of course, cows and chickens are not our only options, as we also have the newly added sheep. Sheep cost 4,000 gold, making them a cheaper option than cows, though, bear in mind, much like how the cows will need a milker, the sheep require the purchase of clippers from Rick's shop, which will cost another 1,000 gold. Also worth noting that, unlike cows, which can be milked every day, sheep only regrow their wool every 7 days. The trade-off is that wool sells for more than milk, even the golden milk. Sheep can produce two kinds of wool depending on their happiness. Standard wool sells for 900 gold, but with high enough affection, sheep will begin to produce good wool, which sells for 1800 gold. Cows and sheep both eat fodder, which you get from cutting the grass planted in your field. Alternatively, you can let them out into the field to graze, so long as your grass is fully grown. Cows and sheep can be manually pushed to walk in a certain direction, but you'll have an easier time if you purchase the bell, which will call them all towards you at once. They move slowly and, if they're off-screen, may not react to the bell at all, but it's still a better option than moving them in and out one by one. Feeding your cows and sheep outside is also more viable and even an encouraged option in this game. When left inside overnight, your cows and sheep will lose one affection point. This can easily be countered with their everyday care, but if they're left to sleep outside, assuming there's enough grass, then they won't lose affection at all. Plus, when outside, your cows can enter a happy state, which will give you a boost in affection earned from caring for them. Just remember that doing so outside is all done while time is moving, and don't forget to take them back inside when bad weather approaches. Of course, you can also buy fodder to feed your animals if you've run out of your own. Purchase it from Green Ranch for 30 gold a bag, though that will likely be a last resort for most players. Adding sheep to the mix is a nice addition. They're super cute for starters, but from a gameplay perspective, they add some variety to your care. The fact that sheep products are more profitable than that of cows, but take a lot longer to produce, gives the player more to think about and plan when deciding which animals to get. The barn can fit up to 8 animals, and it's up to the player exactly what ratio of cows to sheep they want, depending on what they like, what will be most profitable, or lowest maintenance. That said, it's not a perfect addition. There's no miracle potion for sheep, so you can't breed them to have little baby lambs like you can with cows. There's also no sheep festival to compete in, and just generally less focus on them than the cows. Still, it's a nice bit of gameplay expansion. There's just 2 more animals you have on your farm, and those are, of course, your dog and your horse. The dog is given to players automatically and named at the start of the game. In the SNES game, you needed to pick up your dog a certain number of times to achieve the best ending, but it had little utility outside of that. In Harvest Moon 64, however, your dog actually has its own hidden affection level. You can raise your dog's affection in 3 ways: feeding it, whistling for it, and picking it up. Each of these will gain the player 1 affection point and can be done once a day. Your dog can also lose affection, either by being hit with a tool, like your hammer, or if you fail to feed it. It was once believed that you needed to bring your dog inside at night or when it rained, but that's largely refuted in more recent years. As for your horse, while it's not given to you automatically, you can get it as early as the first day. Simply pay a visit to Green Ranch to witness a cutscene wherein Anne and her father give you a colt to raise. Much like your dog, you have 3 actions that can be performed daily to raise your horse's affection. These are brushing your horse, whistling for your horse, and riding your horse once it's grown. Before it's grown, you can talk to it like you do with your cows and sheep. Just like all your other animals, hitting it with a tool will cause it to lose affection. And your horse will also lose a point of affection automatically every night. Of course, this is easily countered with your everyday care, but if you slack off on doing that, you risk losing a good chunk of affection. And you'll want to keep those affection points high so as to win the dog and horse races. Which, naturally, brings us to the festivals on offer. Harvest Moon 64 offers some returning festivals from the SNES game, but it also brings some exciting new ones to the table. Starting in spring, the first festival players will be able to participate in is the Sowing Festival on the 8th. Every year, a villager that's picked to be king and a guest of his choosing will get to ride in a hot air balloon and spread seeds across the land. The king is chosen at another festival the year prior, so obviously you won't be riding that hot air balloon in your first year. Instead, you can talk to Lilia to get a small balloon and bag of seeds, which you can release with everyone else. Next, on the 17th, there's the Spring Horse Race. Your horse will be too young to participate the first time around, but you'll want to be raising its affection in order to race in the next one. There are 3 races in total, with the first one starting at 10 a.m., and these races will happen with or without the player, so make sure to actually get to the track a little before 10. When not in a race, players have a chance to do a little gambling, and bet on a horse they think will win. To bet on a horse, you have to buy medals, and each medal costs 50 gold. You can bet up to 99 medals on a horse, and you can bet on as many horses in the race as you like, so long as you have the money to do it. Each horse has a different set of odds. The greater the odds, the higher the payout should that horse win. Your payout is in points, which is calculated by taking whatever you bet and multiplying it by the bets that were against the horse. So, say you bet 20 medals on a horse with 2 bets against it. If that horse wins, you earn 40 medals. Meanwhile, if you bet 20 medals on a horse with 5 bets against it and win, you'll earn 100 points. And if the horse or horses you bet on all lose, you are nothing. Generally, the horse that wins will be one with the lowest odds against it, naturally, though on occasion you'll get lucky and a horse with higher bets against it will win. There is, of course, a little exploit you can use to hedge your bets. See, there's a small glitch in the betting screen. When placing your bets, once done, if you hit OK, the game will count your wager and deduct the money you spent for the medals. However, if, instead of hitting OK, you hit the B button to back out, the game will still count your wagers without taking a single penny from your wallet. You can use this exploit to basically place a bet on every horse, thereby guaranteeing a win, without actually losing any money. Of course, while it won't actually take your money, you can only wager as much money as you actually have. If you want to place the maximum wager of 99 medals on all 6 horses in a race, then you'll need at least 29,000 gold on hand. Any points you win at the race can then be exchanged for prizes only available at that festival. And there are 3 items at the horse race. These are the Sustaining Carrot for 500 points. This item was supposed to be used to make your horse faster or have better stamina in races, but recently it's been discovered to be broken and thus kinda useless. The next prize is a stuffed horse for 1,000 points. This is a decorative item that sits in your house. It serves no real function, but it's nice to be able to decorate a little. Lastly, you can get the new stable if you manage to save up a whopping 3,000 points. This will give your horse's stable a nice new paint job, and just like the stuffed horse, while it serves little function, it's the aesthetic that matters. Now, of course, when your horse is old enough, you can begin racing it yourself. You can't make bets on a race you participate in, but you'll likely be more focused on actually winning anyway. When racing, you can spur on your horse by pressing the A button. The goal is to basically balance pressing A enough to get ahead of the other racers without doing it too much and thereby depleting your horse's stamina and exhausting it. And this is where caring for your horse comes in, as the higher your horse's affection, the more stamina it'll have. Winning the horse race for the first time will grant the player a photo for their album, but more on that later. The last festival in spring is the Flower Festival on the 23rd, which is a celebration of the harvest goddess. For this festival, a girl in town is voted on to be that year's goddess. From the 18th to the 22nd, the player can cast their ballot as to which girl they want to be chosen. This can help your girl of choice, but it's not guaranteed that she'll be the one to win. Now, whichever girl is chosen will then wear the harvest goddess dress and dance with that year's king. If the player is not that year's king, then they will get to choose from the remaining 4 girls. There will also be some important items on sale, including a power berry. Moving on to summer, the fireworks festival takes place on the 1st. You're free to spend the day however you want, and in the evening, go to one of multiple optional viewing spots to watch the show. Where you go will likely depend on which bachelorette you want to woo, as they each watch the fireworks from a different location. Ellie is at the bakery, Maria is in the town square, Karen is at the beach, Anne at her ranch, and Potpourri is up on Moon Mountain. And as you likely guessed, watching the fireworks with the bachelorette will raise her affection. The next festival is a bit of a special one, as it only occurs after the player is married. You might not even consider it a true festival. On the 7th, once night falls, your wife will be waiting for you outside of your house, and the two of you will go to the river and send off a bamboo float. It's a small event with little traditional benefit, but it adds some nice flavor and variety to the game, as well as giving the player a bonding moment with the girl they chose to marry. Next, on the 9th, is the Vegetable Festival. Just as it sounds, vegetables from all over will be submitted and judged, and a winner will be chosen. The player can, of course, submit their own for the chance to win. Now, there are some conflicting ideas on what it actually takes to win, and I'll admit, I myself am not 100% sure of the answer. I didn't win a single time during this recent playthrough, and time didn't allow me to trial and error it. That said, there isn't really any reward for winning, aside from a small affection boost with the townsfolk. Summer 17th brings us the Firefly Festival. This is a bit of a somber event compared to the more lively ones we've seen so far. This festival is held to send off the town's ancestors. Everyone gathers at the beach after sunset, where they set afloat a myriad of lanterns into the ocean to guide the visiting spirits home. There's not much to do aside from talk to people, but it's a nice way to get a little more background on the characters, and a small but interesting look into the belief systems of this world and the people in it. When the festival is over, you may be asked to walk one of the bachelorettes home, should you have high enough affection with her. Summer 24th brings us the last of the season's holidays with the Sea Festival. Returning to the beach, this festival is another competition, in which all the bachelors, including the player, take part in a swimming race. The first to reach the buoy a couple yards out in the water is the winner. Just tap A rapidly to swim. If you can win at a Mario Party minigame, you can easily win this competition. Winning nets you a photograph and a prize called the Invincible Katori, which is a decoration that will sit inside your house. I remember hearing that this item could protect your greenhouse from being blown away in a typhoon, and it seems I'm not alone in that, but recent digging into the game appears to have disproven it. I'm not really sure where this rumor even came from. Perhaps it simply stems from the fact that the item is labeled invincible, but I don't know. Now, we start off the autumn festivals on the 4th with the Cow Festival. Just as it sounds, this is a competition between local farmers to see who's raised the best cow. You can enter any adult cow that isn't pregnant. If they're producing large milks, then you have a pretty good chance of winning. And should you win, that cow will begin to produce those gold milks we talked about earlier. Now on the 12th is the Harvest Festival. This is the festival that chooses who will be king in the next year's sowing festival. You can talk to villagers and sample various dishes from the bachelorettes while you wait for Ellie to come out with a cake. Once she does, eat the cake offered, and if a coin is in your slice, you'll be next year's king. If you want to complete the photo album, you'll have to be king at least once, which means resetting until you win. The king will always be picked from the bachelors, and it's largely random who gets chosen. Multiple guides online say that you have to reset all the way back to the 9th in order for the game to re-roll who it picks, but that's not true. You can simply restart from the night prior. That said, it can still take a while. I spent a good 45 minutes restarting over and over until I was finally chosen, so good luck. Once the king is chosen, you'll be able to dance with the girl of your choosing before returning home. On Fall 20th, we have the Egg Festival, a returning event from the SNES game. Just like in that game, the mayor will present everyone with an egg, and whoever finds one that matches among the boxes in town and brings it back first gets a point. Whoever gets the most points after 5 rounds wins. The first time you win, the prize will be a coveted power berry. The second time, however, you'll be gifted with a turtle figure. The same turtle figure that was the egg hunt prize in the SNES game, which is a really cute callback. The final fall festival is on the 28th, and it brings us another horse race, which functions exactly like the one in spring. Finally, the winter holidays. On the 10th, we have the Thanksgiving Festival, again, another returning holiday from the SNES title. Just like that game, this is a day for the girls to give baked treats to the menfolk. If you have moderate friendship with any of the girls, then you can stop by her home and receive a gift. If you have high affection, however, then that girl will stop by your farm to deliver her gift personally. On the 19th of winter, we have the dog race. This is very similar to the horse races, with some small tweaks. For starters, you don't play an active role when racing your dog, like you do with your horse. Instead, you simply watch and hope that you've gotten your dog's affection high enough to win. Of course, if you've been feeding it, picking it up, and whistling for it every day, that shouldn't really be a problem. And just like with the horse race, winning nets you a photo for your album. The other difference is in the medal exchange prizes on offer. For 500 points, you can get 500 pieces of wood. For 1,000 points, you can get the cute clock, which will change the look of the clock in your inventory menu. Lastly, for 3,000 medals, you can get the awesome house, which is a new doghouse. Much like the upgraded horse stable, this is purely for aesthetics. Fortunately, the medals you earn from betting in the horse and the dog races are completely interchangeable, so if you earned a bunch in the previous horse races, you can use them for the dog race prizes, and vice versa. Next, the Starry Night Festival takes place on Winter 24th. Much like the Fireworks Festival, this is a chance to spend a nice evening with the girl of your choice. Anne, Ellie, and Maria will be at the church, Karen will be at the beach, and Potpourri will be up on Moon Mountain. Whichever girl you spend the holiday with will, of course, gain a boost in affection. Winter 27th brings the Spirit Festival, a holiday made to ward malicious spirits away. Whoever was chosen as king at the previous Harvest Festival will be tasked with inviting 3 people to help them perform the ceremony. If that's the player, then ask any 3 characters you have high affection with. If not, then that year's king may ask the player to help them if they have high enough friendship. Should the player have purchased the ocarina from Saibara, then they'll play that at the ceremony, and if not, then they'll ring a bell. Winter 30th is New Year's Eve. You can choose one of 2 optional locations to spend the evening, that being the church or the bar. Maria, Ellie, and Potpourri will be at the church, while Anne and Karen will be at the bar. Upon leaving whichever locale you choose, the girl with the highest affection in attendance will follow you out and ask you to walk with her up to Moon Mountain to watch the sunrise. And lastly, we're circled back to spring. Spring 1st is New Year's Day, and while technically the first holiday of the year, it will be the last for the player to actually experience, due to them starting the game on the 1st. At this festival, townspeople gather in the square to drink in the new year. Literally. As you greet each character, they'll offer up a toast. Continue toasting with them until you, or they, can't drink anymore and leave. Karen, the resident daughter of the vineyard, is the drinking champ, and you'll have to build up your tolerance to outdrink her. This is actually a hidden mechanic in the game, and its only purpose is this event. but drinking wine at the bar or in the cellar of the vineyard will gradually raise Pete's tolerance. Should you outdrink Karen, you'll gain a small affection boost from her, and a bit of an ego boost for feeling like you outsmarted the game. Now, this tolerance level can actually go down. I'm not sure if it goes down gradually or if it resets all at once, but I definitely failed to drink the next year and totally got wiped at the next New Year's festival. Now, as you can see, that's about 3 times the amount of festivals as the SNES game. Most of the SNES ones return in some way, but the new ones add a lot of variety. And with them spread out fairly evenly over the 4 seasons, the players kept fairly busy all year long, and always has something to look forward to right around the corner. Of course, just like the first game, many of these festivals are a way to get closer to the girl of your choosing. But unlike Harvest Moon on SNES, these events will also increase your friendship with the rest of the townsfolk as well. So let's talk about them. As mentioned earlier, Harvest Moon 64 is a direct sequel to the original SNES title. It's never outright stated in the game, but the connections are pretty easy to make. Aside from the town name and general layout being the same, many characters share obvious ties to ones from the SNES game, with one actual returning character. Potpourri, with her pink hair in place of the flower shop, for example, is a clear descendant of Nina. Anne, Gray, and Rick are equally the grandchildren of Anne. If the red hair and shared name weren't already a giveaway, Rick and Anne both mention how their grandmother was an inventor, with Rick carrying on in her footsteps. You'll even find the same lost weather vane from the first game. Karen mentions that the blonde in her hair comes from her grandmother, and with the connection to the bar and vineyard, it's not hard to guess that this is Eve. Cliff, too, is a grandchild of Eve, making him and Karen cousins. Then, of course, there's Ellen, who's actually in Harvest Moon 64, though now is a much, much older woman and grandmother to Ellie. As far as I know, there's no mentioned ties between Maria and Mary, but with the similar names, looks, and ties to being the mayor's daughter, it's not hard to guess that they're likely related as well. This, of course, all implies that your grandfather is the player character from the first game, which I suppose also weirdly implies that you might be marrying a cousin? But that's probably getting too into the weeds and is clearly not what the devs intended. Of course, it's not at all necessary to have played the SNES game to enjoy and understand Harvest Moon 64. Those connections are largely just Easter eggs for those who did. For new players, the town and its villagers will still provide plenty of interesting stories and characters who will all develop as they're befriended, and befriending each and every character is quite important. See, the villagers in Harvest Moon on SNES often faded into the background and didn't hold nearly as much importance as the eligible girls. But now, these characters all have their own stories, relationships, schedules, likes and dislikes, and you can raise your friendship with them just like you do with the Bachelorettes. Befriending different townsfolk might have them gift you an item, unlock an event, or just give you some extra knowledge and backstory about them and the town. Befriending Kent, Stu, and the Potion Master after winning the dog race, for example, will unlock an event where your dog and their dog have puppies. Meanwhile, befriending Basil will have him return the next spring with an all-important power berry. Receiving the coveted party picture at the end of the game also requires being friends with just about everyone, but we'll cover that in a bit. This added depth to the villagers really makes the town seem more dynamic and alive. You feel more incentivized to talk to these characters and befriend them, not just for the rewards, but for their stories and to hear what they might reveal to you as you grow closer to them. It works to make you feel like you're even more ingrained and active in the world, really becoming a participant in it, just like Yasuhiro wanted when making Harvest Moon on the SNES. Of course, the Bachelorettes are still in many ways the stars of the show, and Harvest Moon once again gives us 5 lovely ladies to choose from. They are, as previously mentioned, Anne, Karen, Potpourri, Maria, and Ellie. Each girl shares similarities with their corresponding bachelorettes from the previous game, but their personalities, quirks, and stories have been greatly expanded upon. Your interactions with them have also been enhanced, going from just 1 heart event with each girl to roughly 6. Not all of these events are required to be seen before marrying the girl of your choosing, but they add much needed depth to each character. Another much needed upgrade is the tweaked heart system. In the first game, to see how much each girl liked you, you'd have to go into her house and read her diary. Now the girl's affection is right on her dialogue box, with the heart replacing the usual A button prompt to advance said dialogue. The color of the heart denotes how much the girl likes you. Starting at white, the heart goes to blue, then green, then yellow, and finally pink. This makes it much more convenient to see exactly where you stand with each girl, as it can be done by simply talking to her. As for those heart events, they all follow a somewhat similar structure. The first event for all girls, for example, is them simply visiting you on the farm. All girls also have a sick event, wherein they'll fall ill and you have the option of visiting them. While this is technically the same event for all the girls, the variation is in the conversation you have with her, as well as seeing the decor in their rooms, which shows off more of each bachelorette's personality. It's also the only time in the games you get to see these bedrooms, making it kinda special. Every girl will also have an event where they sprain their ankle and need your help. After that, every girl has a dream event, wherein you, the player, have a dream about the past. If you find the girl afterwards, an event will take place that harkens back to that memory. Then there are the photo events. Each girl has a special, individual event that you can unlock should you do a couple specific tasks. Doing so will grant you a special event as well as a photo to go alongside it. Lastly, each girl can actually confess to you. This is the final heart event for each girl, though many players might not even see it should they choose to propose to their girl of choice shortly after getting their photo. Now, onto the girls themselves. The first of the bachelorettes is Ellie. Ellie lives and works at the bakery with her grandmother and co-owner Jeff. Ellie is a sweet, homely girl with a warm, down-to-earth personality. She likes baking and sweets, of course, but she also has a love of fishing and can be found on her days off on the mountain doing just that. She's friends with Greg, the fisherman, who comments that he thinks Ellie is secretly a lonely girl, having lost her parents at a young age and having to take care of her aging grandmother. Even so, Ellie maintains a positive outlook and happiness with her life, even when the going gets hard. And it can get hard for poor Ellie. See, Ellen can canonically die in Harvest Moon 64. Should you find her sleeping outside the bakery in spring, talking to her will trigger a cutscene where she passes away. Ellie will, of course, be devastated, and will actively seem much more gloomy for the next couple weeks. She'll recover eventually, of course, and seems to do especially well if married, supported by either Jeff or yourself. And speaking of marriage, at least one site claims that a couple Japanese guidebooks say Ellie is the canon wife in 64, but I can't really confirm nor disprove that. Next up, we have Maria, daughter of the mayor and his wife Anna. Maria is a shy, soft-spoken girl who works at the local library. Maria is a bookish and artistic girl who enjoys spending her time reading, playing music, or painting. She also has a love of insects, much to the dismay of some of the other girls. She's also somewhat naive and kind to a fault, which leaves her vulnerable to those who would take advantage of her, a trait she seems to have inherited from her father. There are multiple cutscenes related to Maria being potentially swindled by someone and needing the help of others. That said, her kindness and naive faith in others is still shown to be a strength rather than a weakness. Moving on, we have Anne. Residing over on Green Ranch, Anne is the local tomboy of the village. Anne is a cheerful and exuberant girl who can sometimes have a bit of a temper and be clumsy with her words. Even so, she has a good heart and a love of animals as well as her family. Anne spends nearly all of her time on the ranch, but on her days off she can often be found spending time with her cousin Rick, at the vineyard with Karen, or out in the mountains enjoying nature. Her mother passed away when she was still very young, and Anne grew up being raised by her father and older brother Gray, the latter of which took on the most responsibility for her care. Thus, Anne hasn't learned a whole lot in the way of things like cooking or baking, and often worries that she isn't really wife material compared to the other girls in town. Of course, not realizing that her charm lies in her friendly and enthusiastic nature and loyalty to loved ones. And then we have Potpourri. And oh, Potpourri. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious already, I have a favorite, and that favorite is Potpourri. She was the first girl I ever married in these games, and as you can imagine, I tend to be drawn to her in almost every game she's in. Potpourri is very much what you'd imagine the town's florist to be. Bubbly and cheerful, Potpourri is a lover of flowers and sweets and girly things. Like Ellie, her friendly disposition hides a more lonely side, with Potpourri often commenting that she wishes she had a sibling, or that she feels left out when her lovey-dovey parents are together. And while Potpourri can seem like a girl with her head in the clouds, she's shown to be a hard worker and intelligent when it comes to her passion, flowers. She knows the names and proper care of a wide variety of plants, and isn't afraid to literally get her hands dirty in their care, even mentioning that she doesn't mind the smell of things like manure, as it's the same smell as the fertilizer she uses. Lastly, we have Karen, who is perhaps the most complex girl of the bunch, both in her personality and story. Karen lives at the vineyard, which is owned by her parents and is mentioned to have been started by her great-grandfather. It was apparently quite prosperous back in the day when it was run by her grandmother, who we now know to be Eve from the first game, but has since started to slip into disrepair. Karen is rebellious and short-tempered, frustrated with her father and the state of the vineyard, while also harboring a deep desire to leave and travel the world. Though, whether this is a true desire to travel or a rebellious desire to escape what she sees as a dead-end life is left up to interpretation. Karen's schedule starts off unpredictable. She can sometimes be found at the vineyard, but more often than not, she can be found in the mountains or at the beach, clearly wanting to avoid home and her constant bickering with her father. Much like her grandmother, Karen can more reliably be found at night working at the local bar. Karen's story, unlike the other girls, can actually play out a couple different ways. Her desire to leave town isn't an empty threat. If the player fails to befriend her and her heart is below green by the second winter, Karen will leave town and not return. If, after that, the player fails to make friends with Kai, the worker at the vineyard, he's likely to leave as well. Alternatively, Karen can be befriended and even married, in which case she'll stay in town, and seeing their daughter married off to a respectable young man nearby will make her parents happy. However, the best ending for Karen and her family is if you actually restore the vineyard. While not terribly hard, this is a rather extended multi-step task that requires befriending a number of different characters, such as Duke at the bar and even the harvest sprites. Pulling this off not only greatly raises the affection of Karen and all the vineyard characters, but it will net you a photo for your album if done before the 7th of fall in your first year. Of course, restoring the vineyard is also key to getting Karen and Kai to marry, which brings me to rival marriages. Yes, the girls you hope to woo in Harvest Moon 64 all have rival bachelors hoping to win their hand instead. As mentioned, Kai is the rival for Karen, and the other couples go as follows. Gray is the rival for Potpourri, Harris is the rival for Maria, Jeff is the rival for Ellie, and Cliff is the rival for Anne. Each bachelorette and her rival have their own set of rival heart events, showing the couple bonding and growing closer. Now, don't worry, you're not at risk of having the girl you like be snatched right out from under your nose, as having them marry another man has a few requirements. If a girl has 120 affection or more, that's roughly a mid-level green heart or higher, and the player isn't married, she won't marry a competing bachelor. On top of that, to get a rival bachelor to marry, you have to befriend him. So, either avoiding friendship with a rival or ensuring that you have high enough affection with the bachelorette will prevent a rival marriage from happening. Of course, once you, the player, marry, all bets are off. So if you've been befriending the rival bachelors, prepare for nearly a week of subsequent marriages to happen right after your own. After you get married, naturally, you can have a child. This requires your wife's affection to remain high and having a crib in your house. Your child will always be a boy and will go through 3 stages of aging, starting out as an infant in a crib, to a toddler who can walk around and say some basic words. Like in the first game, once they're crawling around, they'll don an adorable onesie, though instead of a cow, this time around it'll be a mouse. The rival couples can also have their own children, which will all have their own unique onesies as well. Cliff and Anne's will be a dinosaur, Maria and Harris's will be a panda, Gray and Potpourri's will be a bunny, Ellie and Jeff's will be a chicken, and Karen and Kai's will be legally distinct. This is honestly one of my favorite features of Harvest Moon 64. There's so much personality in these characters and interactions, and befriending the other characters and seeing them married off really makes the world feel more alive and vibrant. These relationships allow you to see sides of characters you might otherwise not be shown, such as Gray's softer side and his love of flowers. And since the player has direct influence over these marriages happening by befriending the rivals, it really gives you a feeling of affecting the world around you in more meaningful ways. It's an aspect I always really miss in any farming sim that doesn't feature it, and I wish it would make a comeback, especially now that so many of these games allow for queer relationships. I realize that aspect might actually be one of the reasons we haven't seen it in a while, as the difference between befriending and courting probably makes rival marriages more complicated to coordinate, but I still think it could be done. Friends, family, farming, and festivals are, of course, not all there is to the game. There are a number of different activities the player can participate in to keep them busy. Fishing is one of them, and that system too has seen a bit of an expansion. In the first game, there was only one type of fish to catch in one spot, and you had to borrow a rod to do so. In Harvest Moon 64, the rod is now a tool given to you, which means you can use it freely in just about any body of water at any time. There are also 3 types of fish to catch now, as opposed to just one. No distinct species or compendium like we'd see in later games, but now you have the ability to catch small, medium, or large fish, which naturally sell for varying prices depending on that size. That said, good luck fishing on any modern port of the game. It always took somewhat fast reflexes to reel in a fish, but it was doable on CRTs. Modern ports of the game, like that on the Switch, however, suffer a small bit of lag, which is normally not noticeable, but it makes itself very evident when fishing. The best solution these days is to rapidly throw and reel in your line over and over, hoping to snag something, or abuse save states. Foraging in the mountains is also a good way to spend your days. There are stumps to cut for wood, along with a plethora of wild food and flowers to gather, which is made much easier than the first game simply by having a proper inventory. Much like the first game, each season brings a variety of different forageables, and now with each villager having a friendship level, you'll want to be gathering these, as certain wild items are favorites amongst the townsfolk. Wild animals like rabbits, squirrels, and insects are also present in the mountain, and you can actually pick them up and show them to people. They'll run away once you set them down, of course, but it's fun to see different characters' reactions to them. Mining also makes a return from the Game Boy game, though in a slightly different capacity. The mines reside in the cave behind the woodcutter's lodge, and it's only open in the winter. While that might seem restrictive at first, in some ways it actually provides something unique to look forward to in a season that can sometimes feel lacking in these early titles. Mining starts on Winter 8th and lasts through the season. It's open daily, starting from when you wake up to 5 p.m. A couple things to remember. You need your hoe to mine, and once inside, you can't come out until 5 p.m. when it closes, so make sure you have plenty of empty slots in your inventory, save for a stamina item or two if you need. To mine for items, you simply use the hoe to dig. What each square holds is randomized and can either be nothing, a cave-exclusive item, a power berry, or a hole leading to the next level. If the system sounds familiar, that's probably because it's very similar to what Stardew Valley would do decades later. The items you dig up are largely good for selling, though a couple can be gifted to specific characters in town. There's a couple more mechanics and aspects of the game I want to mention, but I don't really have an elegant way to segue into any of them, so here we go. Recipes. Yes, the game has cooking recipes, all of which you get from various villagers in town. Every character in town has a recipe they can share with you, and they'll do so when you gift them a specific item that correlates to the recipe. Gifting a strawberry to Karen, for example, will have her give you the strawberry champagne recipe. Now, despite being able to build a kitchen onto your house, you can't actually cook any of these. However, having all 35 recipes is key to getting a good review from the gourmand at the end of the year, and plays into your final score. Now, speaking of that kitchen, just like the first game, Harvest Moon 64 has house extensions, which you can order from the carpenters, provided you have enough money saved and lumber gathered. These are a kitchen, a bathroom, a stairway, a baby bed, a log terrace, and a greenhouse. The stairway leads up to your roof and is, frankly, the most useless of these upgrades, as there's really nothing to do up there. I'm honestly not even sure why it was included, and can only guess that maybe it was the remnants of an idea that was scrapped somewhere along the way. The terrace is equally, mostly useless as well. It serves a purpose for the ending of the game, and is a handy way to keep track of your horse, but has no real functionality outside of that. The kitchen, while not allowing you to cook, does unlock the fridge, which you can use to store food items in. Personally, I stocked it full of spare herbs and such to feed my dog in the winter when no forageable food is available. The bathroom unlocks the toilet and the bathtub. The exact effect of these is debated a little, with some saying one relieves fatigue and the other restores stamina, while other sources claim that using the toilet raises happiness. I don't have an answer. The baby bed is self-explanatory and is required in order to, well, have a baby. Finally, the greenhouse, which is perhaps the most useful of the extensions. Just like it sounds, the greenhouse is a place to plant crops, and it allows you to both purchase and plant any of the different crops all year round, save for the strawberries, which I mentioned earlier. It also comes with the obvious benefit of being a building, which means no more in-game time wasted on plant care. Now, unlike the rest of your extensions, you can actually lose your greenhouse. Should a summer typhoon hit, there is a small chance that your greenhouse will be blown away, and you'll have to save the lumber and money to build it all over again. I remember back in the day hearing rumors that putting your dog in the greenhouse when a typhoon was coming would prevent it from blowing away, or that winning the invincible Katori at the Summer Sea Festival, or the horse plush at the horse race, would prevent typhoons from hitting at all. Neither seemed to be true, despite those rumors still floating around on some old sites and message boards. Now that's all of the house upgrades, but there are other things you can acquire to further decorate your home. The Invincible Katori is one such item, but there's a whole host of others, such as the stuffed horse, the flower vase, a painting for your wall, and more. Each of these is acquired a different way, some won, some purchased, and some gifted. It's a long way from the full customization we often see in such games these days, as these items can't be moved around, changed in color, or removed once owned, but it's still a nice touch and makes your home slowly feel more cozy. There's also those photos I've mentioned a couple times already, and bear with me, this section will be a little bit long. In your house, you have a photo album, and starting out, it holds only one picture, an old sepia one of your grandfather and you as a child. But throughout the course of the game, accomplishing certain tasks will reward you with another photo to mark the occasion. There are a total of 15 additional photos you can acquire. 5 are what I would categorize as victory photos for various festivals throughout the year. You have one for winning at the horse race, the dog race, and the cow competition. You have one for winning the swimming competition, and one for being the Harvest King at the sewing festival as well. You have another 4 for what I would call landmark photos, or photos commemorating a special occasion. You have one for helping to complete the hot springs, and one for completing every house extension. You also have one commemorating your wedding, and one for the birth of your child. And while you can only earn one wedding and childbirth photo per playthrough, obviously, there are actually a total of 5 unique variants depending on which girl you marry. Then there are the 5 bachelorette photos. All of these photos have a set of unique requirements and even time limits on when they have to be done. Lastly, there's the party photo, which you earn at the end of the game if you've achieved a handful of specific tasks. Again, there's a little discrepancy online about what it takes to acquire this photo, but here's what I followed that worked. Collect at least 6 of the 10 available power berries. Have a happiness score of at least 250. Have your dog's affection at 200 or higher. Have your wife's affection at 250 or higher. Have a baby. Have max or close to max friendship with all NPCs. Have 1 or more adult chicken that's happy and laying eggs. Complete all 6 house extensions, and have at least 384 squares of your field filled with grass. It is possible to collect all 15 of these photos, but boy is it a challenge to do so. Your schedule needs to be airtight, and you need to know exactly which of the bachelorettes you need to befriend first, and what their heart levels need to be, and when. It gets easier the further you go, but the first season or 2 can be harrowing. I honestly recommend following a guide, especially if you're brand new to the game. I myself had never actually achieved this in the past and was determined to do so this time around. And even after following a guide, I had to start over a couple times early on and use a lot of save states. But I did it. For the first time ever, I did it. Look at my achievement. Behold what I've done.
I mean, look at what I've accomplished. Do you see him? Do you think a depressed person could make this? No.
Next, I'd like to at least mention the Harvest Goddess. She's a returning character from the first game, though she has an updated design and slightly expanded role, though not by much. If you gift her an offering by throwing an item into her pond, you can ask for a small handful of blessings. One to raise a girl's affection, one for good weather, and one for some restored stamina. Most notably, you can get a power berry from her, and she plays a role in restoring the vineyard. While her presence in Harvest Moon 64 is still a bit limited, I would be remiss not to mention her, as she will be a recurring character, as well as a recurring motif within the franchise as a whole. There's also Princess Vanilla, who's not in the game, but I'd like to yap about her anyway. Princess Vanilla is cut content for Harvest Moon 64, and while we don't know a lot about her, the game files do contain a number of her unused assets and dialogue. We even know what she looks like, since her sprites and dialogue avatars are in the files. That said, we don't fully know what her role in the game would have been, though some speculate she would have been a secret sixth bachelorette. Maybe someday we'll get a Story of Seasons game that decides to bring her back. Lastly, I want to touch upon the game's exploits and glitches because, oh boy, does Harvest Moon 64 have some glitches. A good number are the kind that will freeze your game or break boundaries, so I won't go through all of them, but I'll touch on a couple of the more famous and exploitable ones. The first would be the dog and horse race glitch, which I mentioned back in the festival section. This is perhaps one of the more famous ones, but since we already went over it, I won't detail it again. Next, there's the music box exploit. See, there's an old music box you can dig up in your fields. If you're friends with Rick and have the broken music box in your inventory, he'll fix it up where it can then be presented to a girl for an affection boost. The thing is, the music box is near infinite, as a new one can be dug up every day, provided that you don't already have it in your inventory. This certainly seems like a thing that you should have only been able to do once, and yet it's also a key tool in getting the party photo, as it greatly helps in befriending the girls. I'm not sure if this was accidentally left in the game, or if it's something that the devs purposefully left as a treat. Then there's the dialogue glitch. See, talking to a character every day will increase their friendship by about 1 point. A cap is supposed to be programmed in to ensure that you can only get that one conversation point a day, but it seems to be broken for a few characters, usually by utilizing a certain item that you can show them, but not actually gift them. The most famous of these would be the Karen and dog glitch. See, Karen's dialogue exploit has to do with your dog. While her normal daily dialogue has the point cap, her dialogue for when she sees your dog doesn't, meaning you can show her your dog over and over and over again and simply max her affection out in one day, or night if you do this at the bar, ensuring you don't even waste any in-game time. Again, you can do the same trick with a couple other characters in the game, but Karen only requires your dog, which you already have, and she's a marriageable bachelorette, making her exploit one of particular note. So, what is the ultimate goal or endpoint of the game? Much like other farming sims, Harvest Moon 64 can be played ad infinitum, but it does have a main goal. Just like the first game, you'll be graded at the end of a certain period, 2 years in a season to be exact, and everything you accomplish will be added up to your final score. You don't really get a standard numbered score, rather you'll watch a cutscene where your father asks about you around town, and each character he talks to will have something to say about what you have, or have not, accomplished in your time on the farm. The mayor will comment on how much the people in town like you, which is determined by the sum total of friendship points you have with every character. The midwife comments specifically on how popular you are with the bachelorettes in town, which is determined the same way as the mayor's friendship score, however it's only calculated by the affection level of the 5 girls you can marry. The potion shop owner comments on your general health, which is calculated by how many times you got sick and had to spend a day in bed. Doug will comment on the care of your animals. You must have at least 4 cows, 1 sheep, 1 chicken, and your horse. And all of these animals must be in a normal or happy state, meaning no sick animals or unfed ones. Zach comments on how many things you've shipped in total, and will only be impressed if you shipped a whopping 9,000 items or more. Greg, the fisherman, comments on how many fish you've caught, naturally. Once again, best of luck in this regard if you're playing on a modern port. The head carpenter comments on how many house extensions you've built. The highest amount is 6, one for every house extension, and you don't get more should you have to rebuild your greenhouse. Basil comments on how well versed you are in plants, which is not determined by your crops at all, but rather how many squares of grass you have growing in your field. Finally, the gourmet judge comments on your cooking skills, which is determined by how many of those recipes you've collected. After all that, you'll talk with your father for a bit, and he may ask you some questions depending on things like how much money or how many animals you currently have. Your answers won't change anything and serve as a bit of extra flavor and praise for your efforts. And finally, a number of people from the town will gather on your farm to celebrate, and how many people show up depends on how many you've made friends with, though the maximum that can arrive is 11. Should you have accomplished a few specific things, you'll be rewarded with that coveted party photograph. And that's it. Credits will roll, and then you'll be asked if you want to keep playing. If you say yes, your game will continue on the next day. From here, you can continue to play for about as long as you feel, completing or accomplishing anything you didn't before your evaluation, or simply farming to your heart's content. So, thoughts? Well, I'm biased, but Harvest Moon 64 is one of my favorite farming sims of all time. It was, as I mentioned, the first one I ever played, and it's held up over the years. It's charming and cute, and in some ways rather ambitious for the era. Harvest Moon 64 took the building blocks of the first game and ran with them, expanding its systems, setting, and stories by leaps and bounds. The characters are all lovable and quirky, and with their expanded personalities and routines, the town feels so much more alive than in the first game. The actual farming and animal care feels good, and it's nice to see how they expanded your options in terms of adding sheep and new crops. The greenhouse alone is a genius idea, rewarding players with easier farming after they've put in the work to build it. The music, which I haven't mentioned until now, is also a delight. It's jovial and energetic, and has a very homey and down-on-the-farm feel to it, which is about as best as someone with no musical education, can describe. And, okay, pause the script, because in looking for the OST of this game, I stumbled upon an old, but still functioning Angel Fire fan website for Harvest Moon 64, and it was like being transported back to my youth. Yes, this is what so many websites, fan-made websites especially, used to look like back in the day. And God, this one really has it all. Poorly tiled background, a top banner made in MS Paint, links to similar fan sites, reviews by random people, a guest book. A guest book! I only wish it was still functioning, because I would have signed it. I poke fun, but it really was a delightful little time capsule to stumble upon. Wherever you are, Adam Robinson, thank you. Genuinely. It made my day to find your old site still up and running. Now, moving on. Despite all the good it does, Harvest Moon 64 is not a perfect game. Far from it. It's got its fair share of glitches, and the localization is filled with typos and the occasional completely incomprehensible sentence. The inventory, while infinitely better than having no inventory, is still a bit small. I actually find it most noticeable with the tools, where it always felt like I had just one space too few for the selection of tools I would ideally want to carry. The villagers also, while greatly expanded on, still sometimes felt lacking. Specifically, I found myself wishing characters had a little more to say about special events or milestones reached. The grandparents of my child, for example, should ideally have things to say about that instead of just commenting on the weather or whatever like always. And the 2-year, 1-season time limit before evaluation feels both too fast and too slow. On one hand, trying to fill out the entire photo album feels like a task you need to do at breakneck speed, which can prevent you from really enjoying the game at your own relaxed pace. At the same time, when your evaluation finally rolls around, you've likely accomplished most of what the game has to offer, even if you weren't rushing, and those last few weeks might feel like you're kind of waiting out the clock. That said, I find it hard to really hold any of that against the game. It's genuinely impressive what they accomplished with this game, not just for the era, but for it being only the second mainline title in the series. If Harvest Moon on SNES is where the seed of the series was planted, pun intended, then Harvest Moon 64 is where it really took root. Harvest Moon 64 is a game dripping with nostalgia. Even if you've never played it before, you feel it. I mentioned in my first video that Yasuhiro Wada wanted to create a game inspired by his childhood in the countryside, and that really comes through in this game. Harvest Moon 64 is a game made of sleepy afternoons and syrupy slow childhood summers. Playing it, for me, brings me back to summer vacation, sitting side by side with my best friend in front of our old, buzzing CRT, or trips to see family in the countryside, climbing trees, fishing, and simply wandering through open fields, cicadas buzzing in the evening glow. It's also a game that always held a sense of wonder for me. It came out in the era before hacking and internet guides, before we had the tools to fully take games apart and share what we learned en masse online. That doesn't mean there were no websites talking about it, but I learned just as much from those sites as I did swapping tips and secrets with my friends at school. And with so many secrets, exploits, and, frankly, misinformation, it always felt like there might be something new to discover about it. Hell, even to this day, there are sites with outdated information about this game, so who knows? Maybe it's retained a bit of that mystery for some of you as well. And the older I get, and the more I play Harvest Moon 64 as an adult, the more I notice that Harvest Moon 64 has an interesting focus on death. Nothing drastic, nothing particularly morbid. We're not in the rotting world of Bloodborne or the death-centric cycle of Final Fantasy X, but for a life sim and a game that some would call cozy or wholesome or any other cloying descriptor, Harvest Moon 64 puts an odd emphasis on the subject of death. The game begins with a funeral, the death of your grandfather. Ellen can pass away. A number of younger characters in town are without one or both parents. Multiple character events discuss death and the way some creatures have to die in order to feed others. There's an entire festival dedicated to sending off the spirits of the dead, and the elderly characters often talk about aging, of time passing, and what life is like when you're near the end of it. Death is ever present in Harvest Moon 64, but not in a morbid or morose way. Death can be sad and painful, yes. The town itself, Flowerbud Village, is dying, struggling as part of its population ages and its industry fades. But it's also growing. The player moves in, revives the once dead farm. They help the vineyard get back on its feet. They marry and have a child, as do the other young adults in town. At your grandfather's funeral, the old folks drink in his honor, saying it should be a joyous occasion, not a sad one. Ellie faces the passing of her grandmother, Ellen, and comes out on the other side with a smile, promising to shine brighter than ever before. The characters who have faced loss and hardship find new friends, make new connections, build new families. It's not grand, sure. You'll find no great epic in the sometimes poorly translated script of Harvest Moon 64. But Harvest Moon 64 presents death with a quiet dignity. It's a game about life, and its own soft, quiet way, it holds the hand of death and says, this is part of life too. If you haven't played Harvest Moon 64, I really can't recommend it enough. It's a landmark in the franchise, and would provide the building blocks for a good many games in the series. So please, check it out if you get the chance. Or go replay it if it's been a while since you last picked it up. It's never a bad time to go back to the farm. Whew! Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a huge undertaking, and I hope I did this game justice. For the next video, I'll be moving on to the second Game Boy game, which hopefully shouldn't take quite as long as this video did. I have a couple non-farming sim things I'd like to make videos on as well, so please look forward to those. And if you want to keep up with me elsewhere, I've actually begun streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I'd love to see you there. In the meantime, take care. I'll see you around.